When seven-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton walks into the FIA headquarters in Paris, he expects a fair hearing. What he gets instead is a judge who has already decided his fate. Commissioner Bernard Dubois, a veteran FIA official with a hidden agenda, doesn't even try to hide his bias. He actually laughs when Lewis defends his racing record. But Lewis Hamilton didn't become one of the greatest drivers in history by backing down from a challenge. When the commissioner dismisses his integrity with a mocking laugh, no one expects the dignified response that will not only silence the courtroom, but ultimately change the sport forever. What begins as a simple case about track limits during the Monaco Grand Prix quickly reveals a pattern of bias that has shadowed Lewis throughout his career. As he uncovers the truth behind Dubois' vendetta, Lewis must fight not just for his reputation, but for fairness in a sport he's dedicated his life to transforming. Lewis Hamilton stood on his balcony, breathing in the salty morning air. From his Monaco apartment, he could see the sparkling blue of the Mediterranean Sea. Small boats dotted the water, looking like toys from this height. It was 7:30 a.m., and Lewis had already finished his morning workout. He picked up his mug of green tea, feeling the warmth against his fingers. These quiet moments were rare in the life of a seven-time Formula One world champion. Lewis took a sip and closed his eyes, enjoying the peace. The sharp ring of his phone broke the silence. Lewis glanced at the screen and saw Toto Wolff's name. The Mercedes team boss rarely called this early, unless something was wrong. "Morning, Toto," Lewis answered, trying to sound casual despite the worry creeping into his mind. "Lewis, we have a problem." Toto's Austrian accent was stronger than usual, a sign he was stressed. "The FIA has filed a complaint against you. They claim you broke Rule 12.2.1 during the Monaco Grand Prix last weekend." Lewis's stomach dropped. The tea suddenly tasted bitter in his mouth. "What? That's ridiculous," he said, remembering the race clearly. "You mean when I went off track avoiding Max?" 3 days ago, during the Monaco Grand Prix, Lewis had been battling with Max Verstappen for second place. As they approached the tight casino corner, Max had defended aggressively, leaving Lewis with a split-second decision: crash into Max or go off track. He'd chosen safety, cutting the corner and rejoining the track ahead. "Yes, that incident," Toto confirmed. "They're saying you gained an unfair advantage by cutting the corner." Lewis put down his mug with a little too much force. "But that's not what happened. I was avoiding a collision. I had nowhere else to go." "I know, Lewis. We all saw it. But they want you to appear before the stewards panel in Paris next week. This is serious. They're talking about a potential race ban." The words "race ban" sent a chill through Lewis's body. After 15 years in Formula One, he knew how devastating that could be. Not just for the championship points, but for his reputation. "This doesn't make sense," Lewis said, beginning to pace the balcony. "The stewards reviewed it during the race and didn't give me a penalty. Why are they bringing this up now?" There was a pause on the line. "I don't know. It's unusual for the FIA to reopen a case like this. Something feels off." Lewis stopped pacing and looked out at the horizon. The same thought had crossed his mind. Throughout his career, Lewis had faced more scrutiny than many other drivers. As the first and only black champion in the sport's history, he'd dealt with double standards before. "Who's heading the panel?" Lewis asked. "Commissioner Bernard Dubois," Toto answered. Lewis frowned. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. "We'll fight this, Lewis," Toto continued. "I've already called Marcus Chen. He's the best sports lawyer in Europe, and he's agreed to represent you." "Thanks, Toto." Lewis appreciated the support, but a heavy feeling settled in his chest. "Send me the official complaint. I want to read it myself." After ending the call, Lewis went inside and sat on his couch. His peaceful morning was shattered. He pulled up the calendar on his phone and marked the date for the hearing, next Thursday, June 3rd. 1 week away. His phone buzzed with a text from his physiotherapist and close friend, Angela Cullen. "Just heard the news. This is rubbish. Call me when you can. I'm here for you." Lewis managed a small smile. Angela had been by his side through championships and controversies. Her support never wavered. The official complaint arrived in his email, 10 minutes later. Lewis read it carefully, his frown deepening with each paragraph. The language was unusually harsh, describing his actions as deliberate, reckless, and showing disregard for the rules. Lewis pulled up the race footage on his tablet. He watched the incident again and again. Each time, he saw the same thing. Max moving to block him, leaving no space. Lewis taking evasive action to avoid a crash. Yes, he'd gone off track, but what choice did he have? As the morning wore on, Lewis received calls from his father Anthony, his brother Nicholas, and several team members. All offered support and shared his disbelief. During lunch, his new lawyer Marcus Chen called to introduce himself. "Mr. Hamilton, I want you to know we have a strong case," Marcus said confidently. "I've defended drivers in similar situations before. Have you ever seen the FIA reopen a case that stewards already dismissed during a race?" Lewis asked. There was a slight pause. "No," Marcus admitted. "That's unusual, but we'll be prepared for anything." After the call, Lewis walked back to the balcony. The sun was high now, and the sea glittered like diamonds. Monaco looked peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in his mind. Lewis had faced challenges his entire life. Growing up in Stevenage, England, his father had worked multiple jobs to support his racing dreams. He'd endured racism in a sport where few looked like him. He'd fought back from losing championships by a single point. He'd proven doubters wrong again and again. This was just another battle, but something about it felt personal. That evening, Lewis called his father. "Dad, I don't know what's going on, but this feels targeted." Anthony Hamilton's voice was calm and steady, just as it had been throughout Lewis's childhood. "Son, you've never had it easy in this sport, but you've always let your driving do the talking. This time won't be any different." "I know," Lewis said, "but I've worked so hard to make this sport better, to make it more fair. And now this, which is exactly why they're coming after you," Anthony said. "You've changed the sport, Lewis. You've made them uncomfortable. Some people don't like change." After they hung up, Lewis sat in the growing darkness of his apartment. His father was right. Throughout his career, Lewis had used his voice to fight for equality and justice, both in racing and beyond. He'd pushed Formula One to face its lack of diversity. He'd taken a knee when others stood. He'd spoken up when others stayed silent. And he'd won. 7 world championships, 98 race victories, more pole positions than any driver in history. Lewis picked up his phone and opened Instagram. His fans were already flooding social media with support, using hashtags like "I stand with Lewis" and "Sandru, we race as one." He typed a simple message: "Truth always comes to light. Thank you for your support. See you in Paris." As he pressed send, Lewis knew the coming week would test him. But he'd never backed down from a fight before. He wouldn't start now. A week passed in a blur of preparation. Lewis spent hours with Marcus Chen, reviewing race footage and FIA regulations. They practiced possible questions and prepared detailed responses. By the time Lewis boarded his private jet to Paris, He felt as ready as he could be. "Remember, we have the facts on our side," Marcus said as they rode in a sleek black car from Le Bourget Airport to central Paris. The young lawyer looked sharp in his navy suit, a folder of documents resting on his lap. Louis nodded, looking out at the Parisian streets. The morning sun cast a golden glow on the historic buildings. On any other day, he might have enjoyed the beauty of the city. Today, his mind was elsewhere. "What can you tell me about Commissioner Dubois?" Louis asked. Marcus frowned slightly. "He's been with the FIA for 20 years, known for being strict about rules. Some drivers call him the Hammer because he rarely shows leniency." "Great," Louis muttered. The car pulled up to the FIA headquarters, a tall glass building that reflected the clouds above. Outside, a small group of fans had gathered, holding signs with Louis's name and number. They cheered when they saw him. Louis waved, grateful for their support. As they entered the building, Louis felt eyes on him. FIA staff members stopped talking as he passed. Some nodded respectfully. Others simply stared. "Mr. Hamilton? Mr. Chen?" A woman in a crisp gray suit approached them in the lobby. "I'm Claudia Moreau, FIA secretary. Please follow me." She led them to an elevator that required a key card to operate. "The hearing will begin in 30 minutes. You'll be in meeting room A on the 10th floor." As they rode up, Louis felt his phone vibrate. It was a text from Toto. "We're all behind. You. Stay calm. Stay focused." Meeting room A was larger than Louis expected. A long, curved desk faced rows of chairs. Behind the desk were 7 empty seats with nameplates. In the center, Commissioner Bernard Dubois. "Remember, stay calm," Marcus whispered. "The FIA judge, Commissioner Dubois, can be harsh. Don't let him provoke you." Louis nodded, taking a seat at the small table facing the main desk. He adjusted his black tie and smoothed his charcoal suit jacket. His heart was racing, but he kept his face neutral. Slowly, the room filled. FIA officials, legal representatives, and a few journalists took seats in the back. At exactly 10 a.m., a side door opened. Commissioner Dubois entered first. He was an older man, perhaps in his 60s, with steel gray hair and glasses that sat low on his nose. His face was stern, with deep lines around his mouth. 5 other stewards followed him, 3 men and 2 women. They took their seats behind the ODV desk. The last person to enter was a tall man with silver-streaked black hair. He carried a thick folder and walked with confidence. "That's Vincent Laurent, the FIA prosecutor," Marcus whispered. "He's tough." Claudia Moreau stood. "This hearing is now in session. Case number F1 2025-143, FIA versus Lewis Hamilton regarding an alleged violation of Rule 12.2.1 during the Monaco Grand Prix." Commissioner Dubois adjusted his microphone. "Mr. Hamilton," he said, his voice echoing in the quiet room, "you are accused of violating Rule 12.2.1 during the Monaco Grand Prix, gaining an unfair advantage by leaving the track limits." His French accent was thick, but his English was perfect. His eyes, sharp behind his glasses, fixed on Louis. Louis sat tall. "I respect the rules of our sport, sir, but I was avoiding a collision." Commissioner Dubois's expression didn't change. He pressed a button, and a large screen on the wall came to life. It showed footage of the incident from multiple angles. Louis watched as the recording showed him battling with Max, then taking evasive action, going off track, and rejoining. "Ahead! You gained 0.3 of a second advantage," Commissioner Dubois said coldly. "And this isn't your first offense regarding track limits this season." Louis started to respond, but Vincent Laurent stepped forward. "If I may, Commissioner," Laurent said, "the FIA would like to present its case." Commissioner Dubois nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Laurent." Laurent moved to the center of the room. "Thank you, Commissioner Dubois, esteemed stewards." His voice was smooth and practiced. "We have evidence that Mr. Hamilton has repeatedly pushed the boundaries of the rules. This time he went too far." Laurent clicked through a series of slides showing various races from the current season. In each one, Lewis's car was highlighted going near or slightly over track limits. "Mr. Hamilton has a pattern of testing boundaries," Laurent continued. "In Monaco, he finally crossed the line. By cutting the corner, he gained a significant advantage over Mr. Verstappen." Lewis felt his face growing warm. This wasn't just about Monaco. They were building a case against his entire driving style. "Furthermore," Laurent said, "Mr. Hamilton's actions set a dangerous precedent. If left unpunished, other drivers might believe they too can ignore track limits when convenient." As Laurent spoke, Lewis noticed something odd. Commissioner Dubois was smiling slightly, almost as if he was enjoying this. It was subtle, just a slight upturn at the corners of his mouth, but unmistakable. Lewis felt a chill. Was this really about the rules, or was something else happening here? Laurent finished his presentation with a final image of Lewis's car rejoining the track ahead of Max's. "The FIA recommends a one-race suspension and a fine of €100,000. The room filled with whispers. A one-race ban was severe, especially for an incident that hadn't been penalized during the race. Commissioner Dubois raised his hand for silence. "Thank you, Mr. Laurent." He turned to Lewis. "Mr. Hamilton, how do you plead to this accusation?" Lewis stood, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. "Not guilty, sir. I was avoiding a collision, which is our first priority as drivers. Safety must come first." Commissioner Dubois's eyebrows rose slightly. "Safety is important, Mr. Hamilton, but so are the rules. Without rules, there is no sport." Marcus stood. "Commissioner, if I may, we have evidence that shows Mr. Hamilton had no choice but to take evasive action." "You will have your turn to present evidence, Mr. Chen," Commissioner Dubois said dismissively. He turned back to Lewis. "Mr. Hamilton, are you suggesting that the rules should not apply to you when you deem it necessary?" Lewis felt his jaw tighten. "No, sir. I'm suggesting that the rules regarding safety take precedence over track limits, as stated in the FIA's own guidelines." For a moment, Commissioner Dubois seemed surprised by Lewis's knowledge of the regulations. Then he adjusted his glasses. "We shall see, Mr. Hamilton. We shall see." As Lewis sat down, he caught the eye of one of the female stewards. Unlike Dubois, she was watching him with what appeared to be genuine curiosity. Her nameplate read, "Ana Rodriguez." Marcus leaned close to Lewis. "That went as expected. Don't worry. We'll have our chance." But Lewis couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way Commissioner Dubois had smiled during Laurent's accusations, the way he dismissed Marcus, the focus on Lewis's past driving, not just the Monaco incident. Lewis had faced bias before in his career. He knew what it looked like, how it felt. This hearing had barely begun, and already he sensed that fairness might be a luxury he wouldn't be afforded. As Laurent called his first witness, a track marshal from Monaco, Lewis steeled himself. If this was going to be a battle, so be it. He hadn't become a 7-time world champion by backing down from challenges. He glanced again at Commissioner Dubois, who was listening intently to the marshal's testimony. There was that slight smile. Again, Lewis took a deep breath. Whatever was happening here, he would face it head-on. just as he always had. The track marshal from Monaco finished his testimony, claiming that Lewis had clearly violated track limits. 3 more witnesses followed: an FIA technical expert, another marshal, and a racing analyst who frequently appeared on television. All supported the FIA's position. Throughout their testimonies, Lewis maintained his composure. He took notes and whispered occasionally to Marcus, but his face revealed nothing. After 4 hours, Commissioner Dubois announced a lunch break. "We will reconvene at 2 p.m., he said, standing. "At that time, Mr. Chen and Mr. Hamilton may present their defense." As he being, the room emptied, Lewis and Marcus remained seated. "They're building a strong case," Marcus admitted once they were alone. "But we have better evidence." Lewis nodded, loosening his tie slightly. "Did you notice how Dubois reacted when I mentioned the safety guidelines?" "Yes," Marcus said thoughtfully. "He seemed surprised that you knew the regulations so well." "It's like he expected me to be unprepared," Lewis said. "Like he thought I wouldn't understand the rules." Before Marcus could respond, the door opened. Angela Cullen walked in, carrying 2 paper bags. "Thought you might need real food," she said, her New Zealand accent a welcome sound. Angela had been Lewis's physiotherapist and confidant for years. "How's it going?" "Not great," Lewis admitted, "but we haven't had our turn yet." Angela placed the food on the table and sat beside Lewis. "I've been watching the live feed in the waiting room. That Dubois character seems to have it in for you." Lewis unwrapped a sandwich. "You noticed that too?" "Everyone's noticed," Angela said. "The reporters are already whispering about bias." This was both good and bad news. Good that others saw what Lewis saw. Bad that the proceedings might be tainted beyond repair. They ate quickly, discussing strategy with Marcus. At 1:55 p.m., Angela squeezed Lewis's shoulder. "Show them who you are," she said, before leaving. Exactly at 2 p.m., Commissioner Dubois and the other stewards returned. The room filled again, this time with even more people. Word had spread about the morning session. "Mr. Chen," Commissioner Dubois said, "you may now present your defense." Marcus stood, straightening his suit jacket. He was young but brilliant, having defended other drivers in similar cases. "Thank you, Commissioner," Marcus said. "If I may, I'd like to present our evidence." Marcus connected his laptop to the room's display system. The screen showed a different angle of the Monaco incident. One, not shown in the morning session. "As you can see," Marcus explained, "this camera angle from Mr. Hamilton's onboard camera clearly shows Mr. Verstappen's car moving toward Mr. Hamilton, leaving him no choice but to go off track." He played the footage in slow motion. From this view, it was obvious that Max had moved under braking, a dangerous maneuver. "Mr. Hamilton had 3 options," Marcus continued. "Crash into Mr. Verstappen, crash into the barrier, or take evasive action off track. He chose the only safe option." Marcus clicked to the next slide, the FIA's own safety guidelines. According to Section 4.2 of the FIA safety protocols, and I quote, "Driver safety takes precedence over track limits when collision avoidance is necessary." Lewis watched the steward's reactions. Steward Rodriguez was nodding slightly, studying the evidence carefully. 2 others seemed to be considering Marcus's points seriously, but Commissioner Dubois's expression remained skeptical. "Furthermore," Marcus said, displaying more evidence, "telemetry data shows that Mr. Hamilton actually slowed down when rejoining the track, negating any advantage he might have gained by cutting the corner." For the next 40 minutes, Marcus presented a compelling case. He showed similar incidents from other races where no penalties were given, expert opinions supporting Lewis's actions, and detailed analysis of the telemetry data. Commissioner Dubois adjusted his glasses. Thank you, Mr. Chen, but rules are rules. While your evidence is interesting, it doesn't change the fact that Mr. Hamilton left the track and rejoined ahead of Mr. Verstappen. Marcus looked surprised by this dismissal of their evidence. Sir, with respect, the rules also state that safety takes precedence, as I've shown. Safety is indeed important, Mr. Chen, Commissioner Dubois said, his tone condescending. But every driver claims safety when they break the rules. Lewis felt his patience wearing thin. This wasn't a fair hearing. It was becoming clearer by the minute. Commissioner, Lewis said, standing. May I speak? Commissioner Dubois looked surprised, but nodded. Of course, Mr. Hamilton. Lewis took a deep breath. Throughout my career, I've always tried to race fairly. I respect this sport too much to cheat. To Lewis's shock, Commissioner Dubois actually laughed at this. The sound was short and dismissive, but everyone heard it. Mr. Hamilton, your reputation doesn't exempt you from the rules, he said with a small smile. Many would say your celebrity status has given you special treatment in the past. The room fell silent. The comment hung in the air, its meaning clear to everyone present. Lewis felt his face grow warm. He knew what that comment really meant. It was the same thing he'd heard his whole career, that he didn't earn his place, that his success came from special treatment, not talent or hard work. Steward Rodriguez looked uncomfortable. She glanced at Dubois with a frown, then back at Lewis with what appeared to be an apologetic expression. Commissioner, Marcus said quickly, I must object to that characterization. Mr. Hamilton's record speaks for itself. Commissioner Dubois waved a hand dismissively. Simply an observation, Mr. Chen. Lewis remained standing. He had faced this kind of subtle bias throughout his career. The insinuation that his achievements were somehow less valid, that rules were bent for him rather than against him. If I may continue, Lewis said, keeping his voice steady despite his anger. The telemetry data shows clearly that I lost time overall due to going off track. I rejoined ahead of Max because he had to slow down more for the corner. A corner I still had to navigate, just from a different angle. Lewis pointed to the screen where the data was still displayed. The numbers don't lie, Commissioner. I gained no advantage. Commissioner Dubois's smile faded slightly. He hadn't expected Lewis to challenge him directly or to understand the technical data so thoroughly. The numbers, as you say, are subject to interpretation, Mr. Hamilton, Dubois replied. Our technical experts have a different analysis. Then perhaps we should ask a neutral party to review the data, Lewis suggested. Commissioner Dubois frowned. That won't be necessary. This panel is qualified to evaluate the evidence. Lewis nodded slowly, returning to his seat. He had made his point, not just about the data, but about Dubois' attitude. The room had heard the laugh, the dismissive tone, the thinly veiled comment about special treatment. As the afternoon continued, Marcus called two witnesses, a respected former driver who now worked as a steward at other races, and Mercedes' chief strategist who confirmed the telemetry data. Both supported Lewis's position that he had no choice but to leave the track and that he gained no lasting advantage. Throughout their testimony, Lewis studied Commissioner Dubois. The man was professional, but his bias showed in subtle ways. How he interrupted witnesses supporting Lewis, how he frowned at certain evidence, how he exchanged glances with Vincent Laurent. Looking around the room, Lewis realized this wasn't just about a racing incident. The clues were all there: the smile, the laugh, the thinly veiled comments. Something deeper was happening here. As the session drew to a close, Commissioner Dubois cleared his throat. We will adjourn for today and continue tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Lewis gathered his notes, his mind racing. He needed to understand what was really happening. Why this case? Why now? Why Dubois? As they left the hearing room, Lewis noticed Steward Rodriguez watching him. Their eyes met briefly, and she looked away quickly. But not before Lewis caught something in her expression. Concern, perhaps. Or guilt. "Well," Marcus said quietly as they walked toward the elevator, "at least now we know what we're up against." Lewis nodded grimly. "We're not just fighting a penalty. We're fighting something much bigger." That evening, Lewis sat in his hotel room with Marcus and Angela. Rain pattered against the windows, matching his somber mood. Room service dishes sat, half-eaten, on a table by the window. "There's something more going on here," Lewis said, pacing the room. The way Dubois laughed, it wasn't just about Monaco. Angela nodded from her spot on the couch. "I felt it too. Like he had already decided before you even walked in." "It's not unusual for officials to have strong opinions," Marcus said, but Dubois seemed almost personal about it. Lewis stopped by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. When he made that comment about special treatment, I knew this wasn't just about racing. "What did he mean by that anyway?" Angela asked. Lewis turned back to face them. "It's what people have said my whole career. That I only got opportunities because I'm different. That Mercedes favors me. That the FIA goes easy on me." "Which is ridiculous," Angela said firmly. "You've had to work twice as hard as everyone else." Marcus was typing rapidly on his laptop. "I've been researching Commissioner Dubois since we left. Lewis, did you know he was a steward at the 2008 Belgian Grand Prix?" Lewis stopped pacing. "Spa? When I got that penalty that almost cost me my first championship?" "Exactly," Marcus said, turning his laptop so Lewis could see the screen. "He was part of the panel that gave you that 25-second penalty for cutting the chicane while battling Raikkonen." Lewis felt a chill run through him. The 2008 Belgian Grand Prix was one of the most controversial races of his career. In wet conditions, he'd battled with Ferrari's Kimi Raikkonen, been forced off track, and followed the rules by giving the position back. But the stewards had penalized him anyway, dropping him from first to third. Many in the paddock had felt the decision was unjust. "And there's more," Marcus continued. "Before becoming a commissioner, Dubois wrote several articles for racing magazines. I found them in the archives." He scrolled through some pages on his laptop. Here's one from 2019 where he criticizes the direction of F1, particularly about drivers who he felt were getting attention for reasons beyond racing. Lewis sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "He means me." "He doesn't name you directly," Marcus clarified, "but it's pretty clear who he's talking about when he mentions drivers more interested in fashion and social causes than racing tradition." Angela scoffed. "So he's one of those stick-to-sports people?" "Appears that way," Marcus said. "He's written quite a bit about preserving the purity of motorsport and returning to the old values." Lewis shook his head. "This isn't about Monaco at all. This is about who I am and what I represent." The realization was both troubling and familiar. Throughout his career, Lewis had faced resistance for being different, for his style, his outspokenness on social issues, his ventures outside of racing, and, though often unspoken, for being the only black driver in a predominantly white sport. "So, what do we do?" Angela asked. Marcus closed his laptop. "We could file a complaint, ask for Dubois to be removed due to bias." "And that would take weeks," Lewis said. "The penalty would stand in the meantime, and I'd miss races." "Plus," Marcus added, "without concrete evidence of bias, it would be your word against his." Lewis stood and walked to the window again. Paris glittered beyond the rain-streaked glass. The Eiffel Tower lit up in the distance. For a moment, he thought about all the battles he'd fought over the years, not just on the track, but off it. The racist comments early in his career, the criticism for his fashion choices, the backlash when he spoke up about Black Lives Matter, the subtle and not-so-subtle suggestions that he didn't deserve his success. "This isn't new," Lewis said finally. "It's just more of the same fight in a different arena." Angela came to stand beside him. "Then that's what we fight. Not just the penalty, but the bias." "But how?" Lewis asked. "If we call out Dubois directly, he'll just deny it, and it might make things worse." Marcus joined them by the window. "We use the evidence. We make our case so strong that even Dubois can't rule against you without showing his bias to the world." Lewis's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Toto Wolff. "Just spoke to Max Verstappen. He disagrees with the FIA's case against you and is willing to say so publicly. Should we use this?" Lewis showed the message to Marcus and Angela. "That could be powerful," Marcus said. "Max has nothing to gain by defending you. If anything, a penalty for you helps him in the championship." Lewis typed a reply. "Let's hold that card for now, but thank him for me." After sending the message, Lewis turned back to his friends. "Tomorrow we focus on the facts. We make our case so clear that Dubois would look ridiculous ruling against us." "And if that doesn't work?" Angela asked. Lewis's expression hardened. "Then we fight the bigger battle. Because this isn't just about me anymore." Later that night, after Marcus and Angela had gone to their own rooms, Lewis found himself unable to sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, scrolling through messages of support on his phone. His team members, other drivers, fans from around the world, all sending encouragement. One message caught his eye. It was from his father. "Remember, Bahrain, 2007. They didn't think you belonged then either. You proved them wrong. Do it again." Lewis smiled, remembering his first ever Formula One race, how he'd stunned everyone by finishing on the podium. How many had said it was luck, or the car, not his talent? How he'd gone on to prove himself again and again. He opened his laptop and searched for information about Commissioner Dubois. Marcus had found some things, but Lewis wanted to understand more about the man who seemed determined to penalize him. An hour of searching revealed more troubling connections. Dubois had been close friends with several old-guard F1 officials who had resisted changes to the sport. He'd written opinion pieces questioning the push for diversity in motorsport. And most interestingly, before joining the FIA, he'd been a consultant for several racing teams, including Ferrari, during the years when Lewis battled them most fiercely. Lewis closed his laptop and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The pattern was becoming clear. This case wasn't about track limits. It was about limiting Lewis himself, what he represented, how he'd changed the sport, who he'd inspired. The next morning, Lewis walked back into the FIA headquarters with renewed determination. As he passed through security, people whispered and stared. News of the case and Dubois' behavior had leaked to the press. "Lewis, is it true Dubois laughed at you?" a reporter called out as Lewis crossed the lobby. "Is the FIA biased against you?" another shouted. Lewis kept walking, his face calm but his mind racing. By now, the hearing had become more than a simple sporting matter. It had become symbolic of larger issues in the sport. Who belonged, who made the rules, who decided what Formula One would be. As he entered the elevator with Marcus, Lewis noticed people whispering and glancing his way. "They're talking about Dubois' laugh," Marcus said quietly. "It's all over social media." Lewis nodded. "Good. Let them talk." When they arrived at the hearing room, Commissioner Dubois was already seated, looking irritated. The other stewards whispered among themselves, and the room was packed even more tightly than the day before. Commissioner Dubois banged his gavel. "Let's continue where we left off." Louis took his seat, feeling a strange calm despite the tension in the room. Whatever happened today, he would stand his ground. Not just for himself, but for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. As Vincent Laurent stood to resume the FIA's case, Louis caught Steward Rodriguez's eye. She gave him a barely perceptible nod, as if to say, "I see what's happening here too." Louis straightened his tie and prepared for the battle ahead. This wasn't his first time fighting against those who wanted to put him in his place, and if history was any guide, it wouldn't be his last. Vincent Laurent stood at the center of the room, ready to continue the FIA's case. Before we proceed with additional evidence, I'd like to address Mr. Hamilton's claim yesterday that he gained no advantage by leaving the track. Laurent displayed a series of technical graphs on the screen. Our analysis shows that by cutting the corner, Mr. Hamilton gained precisely 0.3227 seconds. This may not sound like much to non-racers, but as we all know, Formula One is a sport of milliseconds. Louis glanced at Marcus, who was already scribbling notes. They had anticipated this. When Laurent finished, Marcus Chen stood. "If I may present our next evidence?" Commissioner Dubois nodded stiffly. "Proceed, Mr. Chen." Marcus connected his tablet to the display system. "I'd like to show the panel a detailed analysis of similar incidents from the past 3 years where drivers went off track to avoid collisions." The screen filled with video clips, data, and rulings from previous races, each carefully selected and organized. In each case, a driver had left the track to avoid a collision, and no penalty was given. "As you can see," Marcus said confidently, "the precedent is clear. When safety is at stake, stewards have consistently ruled in favor of the driver taking evasive action." He clicked to a split screen showing Louis's incident alongside a nearly identical one involving Sebastian Vettel at the Brazilian Grand Prix the previous year. Here, Mr. Vettel went off track to avoid a collision with Mr. Leclerc. The stewards, including you, Commissioner Dubois, ruled it a racing incident with no penalty. Louis watched Dubois's face carefully. The man's expression tightened, but he said nothing. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "in these 12 other cases from 2023 through 2025, drivers left the track to avoid collisions. In each case, the ruling was consistent. Safety takes precedence." Commissioner Dubois frowned. "Each case is unique, Mr. Chen." "Is it?" Louis asked, speaking up. "Or are some drivers judged differently than others?" The room grew tense. Several journalists leaned forward in their seats. Louis could see Steward Rodriguez looking between him and Dubois with concern. Vincent Laurent jumped in. "Mr. Hamilton is trying to distract from his violation by making baseless accusations." Commissioner Dubois nodded. "I agree. Mr. Hamilton, please restrict your comments to the incident in question." Louis took a deep breath. "With respect, sir, I believe the incident in question is being judged unfairly compared to similar cases." He pointed to the screen where the Vettel incident was still displayed. Same corner exit, same evasive action, same result. One driver rejoining ahead of another. Yet one case received no penalty, and the other is facing a race ban. Commissioner, Dubois's face turned slightly red. "We are not here to discuss other cases or perceived injustices, Mr. Hamilton. We are here about Monaco." "Yes, Monaco," Louis agreed, "where I had to make a split-second decision to avoid a crash, just like Mr. Vettel did in Brazil. The only difference I can see is the driver involved." "That's enough, Mr. Hamilton," Dubois said sharply. This panel will not be lectured about consistency. Marcus stepped in smoothly. Let's continue with our evidence, shall we? He displayed telemetry data from Lewis's car. As you can see, Mr. Hamilton actually lost overall pace through this sequence. He slowed significantly before rejoining the I track. The technical presentation continued, but Lewis was only half listening. He was watching the other stewards' reactions. 3 of them were studying the evidence with interest. Steward Rodriguez was taking detailed notes. Only Dubois and 1 other steward seemed dismissive. As Marcus concluded his presentation, a young assistant entered the room and began distributing papers to each steward. When she reached Lewis, she slipped him a small folded note along with the document. Lewis casually unfolded it under the table. It read, "Meeting Room B, Lunch Break, AR." Lewis looked up. Steward Ana Rodriguez was focused on her papers, giving no indication she'd sent a message. The morning session continued with technical experts from both sides debating the telemetry data. The discussion was detailed and complex, focusing on brake pressure, steering angles, and track positioning. At 12:30, Commissioner Dubois announced, "We will break for lunch and reconvene at 2 p.m. As people filed out, Lewis whispered to Marcus, "I need to step away for a few minutes. Meet you at the cafeteria." Marcus nodded, gathering his papers. "Don't be long." Lewis waited until the room had mostly emptied, then made his way to meeting Room B on the same floor. He checked the hallway before entering. No one was watching. Inside, Steward Ana Rodriguez was waiting. She was a middle-aged woman with short, dark hair, wearing a formal gray suit with the FIA emblem. "Mr. Hamilton," she said quickly, "I shouldn't be doing this, but something isn't right here." Lewis closed the door. "I've felt that from the beginning." Rodriguez looked nervous, but determined. Commissioner Dubois held a private meeting with Mr. Laurent yesterday after the session. I was working late and walking past Dubois's office when I overheard them. Lewis felt his pulse quicken. "What did they say?" "I couldn't hear everything, but I heard Dubois tell Laurent to ensure the penalty would stick, regardless of the defense. They were discussing how to counter your evidence before you even presented it." Lewis frowned. "That's completely against the rules of the hearing." "I know," Rodriguez said. "That's why I'm telling you, this isn't right. I've been a steward for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like this." "Can you testify to this?" Lewis asked hopefully. She shook her head. "I'd lose my position. I can't prove what I heard, and Dubois has powerful friends in the FIA." Lewis understood her position. "Why are you taking this risk to tell me?" Rodriguez straightened her shoulders. "Because I love this sport, Mr. Hamilton. And what's happening here isn't sport. It's personal bias affecting a professional decision. It goes against everything the FIA should stand for." She glanced at her watch. "I need to go before someone notices I'm missing." "Wait," Lewis said. "Is there anything I can do with this information?" She hesitated, then said, "Check the 2018 FIA guidelines on conflict of interest. Dubois should have recused himself from this case. Section 14.3 specifically mentions previous controversial rulings involving the same driver." Rodriguez moved to the door but turned back. "I'm not the only steward who's uncomfortable with this, but Dubois is powerful, and people are afraid." After she left, Lewis remained in the room for a moment, processing what he'd learned. It confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't about Monaco at all. It was personal, with roots going back to 2008 and beyond. When Lewis joined Marcus in the cafeteria, he kept his voice low as he explained what Rodriguez had told him. "That's serious," Marcus said, "but hearsay without evidence won't help us directly." She mentioned something specific, though. The 2018 FIA Guidelines on Conflict of Interest. Section 14.3. Marcus immediately pulled out his tablet and began searching. If we can prove Dubois should have recused himself, we might have a way to challenge the entire proceeding. As they ate lunch, Lewis received text messages of support from fellow drivers and fans. One surprised him. It was from Max Verstappen. "This is wrong. You were avoiding me. I told the FIA the same thing this morning." Lewis showed the message to Marcus. "Max contacted the FIA?" "That could be significant," Marcus said. "He's the other driver involved, and he's contradicting the FIA's position." Lewis felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the truth would prevail after all. When they returned to the hearing room, Lewis noticed the other stewards watching Dubois more carefully, as if reassessing him. Had Rodriguez spoken to them too? Commissioner Dubois called the hearing back to order. "We will now hear from the FIA's final expert witness, then move to closing arguments." As the expert began his testimony, Marcus showed Lewis what he'd found on his tablet. Section 14.3 of the 2018 FIA Guidelines. Any official with previous involvement in controversial decisions directly involving a competitor should recuse themselves from new proceedings involving the same competitor where bias might be perceived. Lewis looked at Dubois. The commissioner's involvement in the 2008 Spa decision was exactly the kind of previous involvement described. For the first time since the hearing began, Lewis felt they had found something concrete, not just a feeling of bias, but a specific rule that Dubois had violated simply by presiding over this case. As the FIA's expert finished his testimony, Lewis watched Commissioner Dubois with new understanding. This wasn't just about one incident at Monaco, it was about a pattern that had begun years ago and continued to this day. And now, finally, Lewis had a way to break it. When the FIA's final expert concluded his testimony, Lewis noticed Commissioner Dubois looking at him with suspicion. Did he know about the meeting with Rodriguez? Marcus stood to cross-examine the expert. "You stated that Mr. Hamilton gained an advantage of 0.327 seconds. Could you explain how you calculated that precise figure?" The expert, Dr. Philippe Moreau, adjusted his glasses. "We analyzed the normal racing line versus the line Mr. Hamilton took, factoring in the distance saved and the speed differential." "And did your analysis account for the fact that Mr. Hamilton had to brake heavily before rejoining the track?" Marcus asked. Dr. Moreau hesitated. "We focused on the corner-cutting aspect." "So, you didn't analyze the complete sequence," Marcus pressed. "Just the part that supported your conclusion." Vincent Laurent stood. "Objection. Mr. Chen is leading." "The witness. I'm simply asking for clarification on methodology," Marcus replied calmly. Commissioner Dubois frowned. "Continue, Mr. Chen, but be direct." Marcus displayed Mercedes's telemetry data on the screen. "Our analysis shows that when accounting for the entire sequence, from the moment of potential collision through rejoining the track, Mr. Hamilton actually lost 0.158 seconds compared to his previous lap. Would you agree that analyzing only part of the sequence gives an incomplete picture?" Dr. Moreau looked uncomfortable. "It's possible." For the next 20 minutes, Marcus methodically dismantled the expert's testimony. By the end, even Dubois looked troubled by the holes in the FIA's analysis. When Marcus concluded his cross-examination, he whispered to Lewis, "Time to change strategy. Check the FIA Conflict of Interest Guidelines on your tablet." While Vincent Laurent began his closing arguments, Lewis pulled up the document and read Section 14.3 carefully. Marcus was right. Dubois should never have been allowed to preside over this case. Laurent's closing argument was forceful but predictable. He emphasized the importance of rules, the need for consistency, and the clear evidence, in his view, that Lewis had violated track limits and gained an advantage. In conclusion, Laurent said, the FIA maintains its recommendation for a one-race suspension and a fine of €100,000. Commissioner Dubois nodded. Thank you, Mr. Laurent. Mr. Chen, your closing argument? Marcus stood, but instead of moving to the center of the room as expected, he remained by the defense table. Before I present our closing argument, I need to address a procedural matter that has come to our attention, he said. Lewis could see Dubois tense slightly. I'd like to present new evidence, Marcus announced. Commissioner Dubois looked annoyed. Mr. Chen, closing arguments are not the time for new evidence. This evidence relates to the validity of these proceedings themselves, Marcus countered. FIA regulations permit such evidence at any point. The room filled with whispers. Journalists leaned forward in their seats. Commissioner Dubois's jaw tightened, but he nodded stiffly. Proceed. Marcus connected his tablet to the display system. I draw the panel's attention to Section 14.3 of the 2018 FIA Guidelines on Conflict of Interest. The text appeared on the screen for all to see. Any official with previous involvement in controversial decisions directly involving a competitor should recuse themselves from new proceedings involving the same competitor where bias might be perceived. The room fell silent as people read the words. Commissioner Dubois, Marcus continued, was a steward at the 2008 Belgian Grand Prix, where Mr. Hamilton received a highly controversial penalty that nearly cost him the World Championship. Marcus clicked to show newspaper headlines from 2008. Hamilton robbed at Spa. Controversial penalty sparks outrage. FIA decision questioned by experts. This clearly constitutes previous involvement in controversial decisions directly involving a competitor, Marcus said. Yet Commissioner Dubois did not recuse himself from these proceedings. Lewis watched Dubois' face turn pale, then flush. With anger, Marcus wasn't finished. He displayed screenshots of articles Dubois had written criticizing Lewis. Furthermore, Commissioner Dubois has published multiple articles questioning Mr. Hamilton's impact on the sport, criticizing his activism, and suggesting he receives preferential treatment. The evidence was damning. Journalists were frantically taking notes. Other stewards exchanged glances. Finally, Marcus said, we have reason to believe Commissioner Dubois held private meetings with the FIA prosecutor to discuss strategy against Mr. Hamilton, a clear violation of judicial impartiality. Commissioner Dubois banged his gavel. These accusations are outrageous and irrelevant to the case at hand. With respect, sir, Marcus replied calmly, they are directly relevant to whether these proceedings are valid under FIA regulations. The room erupted in whispers. Steward? Rodriguez stared straight ahead, her face carefully neutral. The other stewards looked troubled. Commissioner Dubois banged his gavel again. Silence! This is irrelevant to the case at hand. Lewis stood. Is it irrelevant when the judge has already decided before hearing the evidence? Is it irrelevant when the judge laughs at a driver defending himself? The room fell silent. Lewis's words hung in the air, challenging and direct. Commissioner Dubois's face was now flushed with anger. Mr. Hamilton, you are out of order. One more outburst, and I'll have you removed. But Lewis could see the other stewards looking uncomfortable. The truth was starting to break through Dubois's carefully constructed facade. During a break, Lewis received another message, this time with a video file attached. It was from an unknown number, but the message said, "You deserve a fair hearing." Right, Hugh showed it to Marcus, who watched it with widening eyes. The video showed Commissioner Dubois meeting with Vincent Laurent the day before the hearing began. Their words confirmed everything. "Hamilton needs to learn his place," Dubois said in the video. "Make sure your evidence focuses on his pattern of behavior, not just Monaco." "We can't use this directly," Marcus whispered. "It was recorded without consent. But now we know for sure." Lewis nodded, thinking quickly. "We don't need to. The conflict of interest evidence is enough. And I have another idea." When the hearing resumed, Marcus continued his closing argument, focusing on the technical evidence that Lewis had no choice but to leave the track and gained no advantage by doing so. As he spoke, Lewis noticed more people entering the back of the room. Word of the conflict of interest allegation had spread quickly. After Marcus concluded, Commissioner Dubois looked around the room, his confidence visibly shaken. "The panel will now deliberate. We will reconvene tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for the verdict." As people began to file out, Lewis approached Vincent Laurent. "Mr. Laurent," Lewis said quietly, "I think you should know that there's video evidence of your private meeting with Commissioner Dubois. The one where he said, 'I need to learn my place.'" Laurent's face drained of color. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do," Lewis replied. "And I think the FIA president would be very interested in that video if this case continues as it has been." Lewis left Laurent standing speechless. Outside the hearing room, reporters swarmed, shouting questions. "Lewis, do you believe the hearing is biased? Will you appeal if they rule against you? Is this about racing or something more?" Lewis simply smiled and said, "I believe in the truth. And the truth always comes to light eventually." As he walked away, his phone buzzed with a text from Toto. "Wolf, FIA president called. He's concerned about how this is being handled. Wants to meet." Lewis showed the message to Marcus, who smiled for the first time in days. The tide is turning. Indeed, the evidence was mounting, not just about Monaco, but about a pattern of bias that had shadowed Lewis for years. And now, finally, it was all coming to light. That evening, Lewis found himself in a private dining room at Le Cinq, one of Paris's most exclusive restaurants. Across from him sat Jean Toussaint, the FIA president, a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and a precise manner of speaking. "This situation has become unfortunate," Toussaint said, carefully cutting his Dover sole. "The hearing has attracted more attention than we anticipated." Lewis took a sip of water. "With respect, Mr. President, it's unfortunate because it never should have happened." Toto Wolff, seated beside Lewis, added, "The evidence clearly shows Lewis was avoiding a collision. Penalty guidelines in such cases are well established." Toussaint dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "Perhaps, but once a case is opened, the FIA must follow procedure." "Even when the procedure itself is compromised?" Lewis asked. "Commissioner Dubois should have recused himself under your own guidelines." The FIA president's expression tightened slightly. "Those allegations are serious, Mr. Hamilton." "They're also true," Lewis said calmly. "Dubois was involved in the 2008 Spa decision. He's written articles criticizing me. These aren't allegations. They're documented facts." Toussaint sighed. "Racing is emotional. Officials sometimes have strong opinions. But that doesn't mean they can't be impartial." "Normally, I'd agree," Lewis replied. "But when a commissioner laughs at a driver during a hearing and holds private strategy meetings with the prosecutor, it goes beyond strong opinions." The president's fork paused midway to his mouth. "Private meetings? Do you have evidence of this?" Lewis met his gaze steadily. "Yes. The dinner continued with careful conversation about the sport's future, upcoming races, and technical regulations. But beneath the polite exchange, Lewis sensed Toussaint's concern growing. As dessert was served, Toussaint finally addressed the core issue. "What outcome are you seeking, Mr. Hamilton?" "Justice," Lewis replied simply. "A fair hearing based on facts, not bias." "And if the panel rules against you tomorrow?" "Then I'll appeal," Lewis said. "And in that appeal, all the evidence about Commissioner Dubois will become public record." Toussaint nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll make some calls tonight." After the dinner, in the back of the Mercedes car taking them to the hotel, Toto turned to Lewis. "You handled that perfectly. Firm, but professional." "Do you think it will make a difference?" Lewis asked. "Toussaint is a politician, but he cares about the FIA's reputation," Toto replied. "The last thing he wants is a public scandal about biased officials." When they reached the hotel, Lewis found Marcus and Angela waiting in his suite. "How was dinner with the president?" Angela asked. "Diplomatic," Lewis answered. "He's concerned about the optics, but I'm not sure he truly understands the issue." Marcus looked up from his laptop. "Well, I have news that might change things. I've been digging deeper into Dubois's past." He turned his computer around to show them. "Look at this. Before joining the FIA full-time, Dubois was a consultant for Ferrari, specifically during the 2007 and 2008 seasons. Lewis felt his breath catch. Those were his first years in Formula One, when he had battled Ferrari's Kimi Raikkonen and Felipe Massa for the championship. "There's more," Marcus continued. His son, Michel Dubois, was a junior engineer at Ferrari during that same period. "So, when he was ruling against me at Spa in 2008, Lewis began, he had direct connections to your main championship rival," Marcus finished. "A clear conflict of interest that was never disclosed." The room fell silent as they absorbed this revelation. "This changes everything," Toto said finally. "It's not just about bias, it's about hidden connections that directly affected championship outcomes." Lewis's phone pinged with another message. It was from the anonymous sender who had sent the video. "Check your email. More evidence of Dubois' bias." Lewis opened his email to find audio recordings of Dubois speaking with other officials over the years, repeatedly questioning Lewis's racing style, his activism, and even suggesting his success was due to having the best car rather than skill. "We can't use these recordings officially without knowing the source," Marcus cautioned. "But they confirm what we already knew." Lewis nodded, his mind racing. "I have an idea. What if we bring in a witness nobody expects?" Later that night, Lewis made a call he never thought he'd make. The conversation was brief, but productive. When he hung up, he turned to his team with a small smile. "Tomorrow will be interesting," he said. The next morning, news vans surrounded the FIA headquarters. Justice for Lewis was trending worldwide. Current and former drivers had spoken out overnight, questioning the proceedings and expressing support for Lewis. Inside, the hearing room was packed beyond capacity. Commissioner Dubois looked tired, his usual confidence diminished. The other stewards seemed tense, especially Rodriguez, who avoided making eye contact with Lewis. "Before we announce our decision," Commissioner Dubois began, "there is a procedural matter to address. The panel has received a request from a witness who wishes to address the court." Murmurs filled the room. "This was unusual for a closing session," Dubois continued reluctantly. "While this is irregular, given the high-profile nature of this case, we have decided to allow it." Vincent Laurent looked confused. "We didn't approve any witnesses for today." This witness contacted the FIA directly. Dubois replied, not meeting Laurent's eye. Lewis fought to keep his expression neutral. His late-night plan was working. Commissioner Dubois cleared his throat. The panel calls Max Verstappen. The room erupted in surprised whispers as the door opened, and Max Verstappen walked in. The Red Bull driver, Lewis's main championship rival, wore a serious expression as he approached the front of the room. "Mr. Verstappen," Dubois said, "you have requested to address this panel regarding the incident at Monaco. Please proceed." Max stood straight, his voice clear. "Thank you for allowing me to speak. I wanted to present my perspective as the other driver involved in the incident." He turned slightly to face both the panel and the room. "Lewis Hamilton had nowhere to go during our battle at Casino Corner. I was defending my position hard, perhaps too hard. He avoided a crash that would have been my fault." The room fell completely silent. No one had expected Max, Lewis's fierce rival, to defend him. "I've reviewed the footage multiple times," Max continued. "Lewis deserves praise for his driving, not a penalty. He rejoined the track safely and, according to our team's data, gained no lasting advantage. If anything, the evasive action cost him time." Commissioner Dubois looked shaken. "Mr. Verstappen, while we appreciate your input, you weren't called as an official witness during the evidential phase." "Actually," Max replied, "I contacted the FIA directly after hearing about this case. I have emails confirming they received my statement 2 days ago, but somehow it wasn't included in the evidence presented here." He held up his phone, showing an email with a timestamp. "I can forward this to the panel if you'd like." Lewis watched Dubois carefully. The commissioner's face had gone pale. Someone had deliberately withheld Max's statement, evidence that would have cleared Lewis immediately. "That won't be necessary," Dubois said quickly. "Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Verstappen." As Max turned to leave, he caught Lewis's eye and gave a small nod. Their rivalry was fierce on track, but both men respected fair play above all. After Max left, Commissioner Dubois conferred quietly with the other stewards. Their whispered conversation seemed tense, with Rodriguez gesturing emphatically at one point. Finally, Dubois addressed the room again. "In light of this new testimony, the panel will need additional time to deliberate. We will take a 1-hour recess." As the officials filed out, Lewis noticed Steward Rodriguez slip something to one of the other stewards, who nodded grimly after reading it. Marcus leaned close to Lewis. "Something's happening behind the scenes. The other stewards don't look happy with Dubois." Lewis nodded. Max's testimony was the perfect push. Dubois can't dismiss it without looking completely biased. Max has nothing to gain by defending me. "Where did that idea come from?" Marcus asked, impressed. Lewis smiled. "Racing teaches you to find the gap when your opponent least expects it." While they waited for the panel to return, Lewis received another text from Max. "They tried to keep me from testifying, said it was too late. I told them either I speak today or I speak to the press tomorrow." "Hope it helps," Lewis replied. "It made all the difference. Thank you." The tide had turned. The secret biases that had influenced decisions for years were finally being exposed to the light. And it had taken an unlikely alliance, Lewis and his fiercest rival standing together for the truth, to make it happen. By the next morning, the story had exploded beyond the racing world. Justice for Lewis trended worldwide alongside bias in F1 and Dubois out. Major news outlets covered the case, not just as a sporting matter, but as a story about fairness, equality, and accountability. Outside FIA headquarters, hundreds of fans gathered with signs and banners. Some wore Lewis's merchandise, others simply held messages of support. "Rules should be the same for everyone," read one large sign. "Racing has no room for bias," said another. Lewis arrived early, stepping out of his car to cheers from the crowd. He hadn't expected this level of support. A young girl, perhaps 10 years old, pushed forward with a small handmade poster. "You showed me I can be a racer too," it read, with a drawing of a black girl in a race car. Lewis knelt to speak with her. "What's your name?" "Amara," she replied shyly. "Keep dreaming big, Amara," Lewis said, signing her poster. "This sport belongs to all of us." As Lewis entered the building, his phone buzzed constantly with messages of support. Fellow drivers from across motorsport had spoken out. Sebastian Vettel had called the proceedings suspicious at best, corrupt at worst. Fernando Alonso questioned why the incident had been reopened after stewards cleared it during the race. Even retired champions like Nico Rosberg and Jenson Button had voiced concerns about bias. Inside, Lewis met Marcus and Angela in the lobby. "It's chaos out there," Angela said, showing Lewis her phone. "Every news channel is covering this." Marcus looked concerned. "The FIA president called 3 times this morning. He sounds desperate to resolve this quietly." Lewis scrolled through messages on his phone. There's nothing quiet about this anymore. When they entered the hearing room, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Where Dubois had once commanded respect, now other officials eyed him warily. 2 additional FIA executives sat in the back. Rowe, clearly sent to monitor the proceedings. Commissioner Dubois looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He cleared his throat as the room settled. "Before we continue," Dubois announced, "I want to make it clear that this court is following proper procedure." His words rang hollow in the charged atmosphere. Lewis noticed Steward Rodriguez exchange glances with another steward. "We have reviewed Mr. Verstappen's testimony," Dubois continued, "and will factor it into our decision. But first, Mr. Chen has requested to present one final piece of evidence. Though highly irregular at this stage, we have agreed to allow it." Marcus stood, looking confident. "Thank you, Commissioner. This evidence has only just become available to us." He connected his tablet to the display system. The screen showed detailed telemetry data from Lewis's car during the Monaco incident. "This is a technical analysis from Mercedes," Marcus explained. "We've isolated the exact moment of the near collision and traced Lewis's actions through rejoining the track." The preset data scrolled across the screen: brake pressure, throttle application, steering angle, and speed measurements. "As you can see," Marcus continued, "Mr. Hamilton actually lost time during this sequence, not gained it as the FIA claimed. He slowed significantly when rejoining the track, negating any advantage." The analysis was compelling. Graphs clearly showed Lewis's car slowing to a pace that put him at a disadvantage compared to his previous lap times. Commissioner Dubois adjusted his glasses. This evidence should have been presented earlier. "We tried," Marcus responded immediately. "Our emails to the court show we submitted it 3 days ago, yet it wasn't included in the evidence." He displayed an email chain showing Mercedes had, indeed, sent the data well before the deadline. Dubois had no response. Lewis could see the case unraveling before the commissioner's eyes. The other stewards were looking at the evidence with interest, several nodding at the clear data. During a mid-morning break, Lewis was approached by an FIA official he didn't recognize. A stern woman in her 50s with a French accent. "Mr. Hamilton," she said quietly. "I'm Elizabeth Moreau, Deputy Director of Racing Governance. There's been a request for you to meet with the FIA President after today's session. He's concerned about how this is being handled." Lewis nodded. "I'm available whenever he wishes to meet." "Good," she replied. And off the record, "This situation has revealed problems within our organization that need addressing. Change is coming." When the session resumed, Lewis noticed Steward Rodriguez whispering urgently to the other stewards. Commissioner Dubois looked increasingly isolated, his authority clearly diminished. Vincent Laurent presented his final response, but it lacked his earlier confidence. He focused on technical interpretations of the rules rather than Lewis's actions, as if trying to salvage something from the crumbling case. "The FIA maintains that rules must be enforced consistently," Laurent concluded weakly. "But we acknowledge that safety considerations are paramount." It was a noticeable retreat from his earlier aggressive stance. Before the panel retired to deliberate, Lewis was allowed a final statement. He stood slowly, feeling the weight of the moment. The room fell completely silent. "I've raced in Formula One for 15 years, Lewis began. "I've won championships and lost them. I've made mistakes and learned from them. But in all that time, I've never stopped loving this sport." He looked directly at Commissioner Dubois. "When I was a kid from Stevenage, I never thought I'd make it to F1. There weren't many people who looked like me in racing. I had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously." Lewis paused, remembering his journey. "I understand that with success comes scrutiny. I accept that. But what I can't accept is being judged by different standards than other drivers. When Commissioner Dubois laughed at me yesterday, it wasn't the first time I've faced dismissal in this sport, but it should be the last." The room remained silent, hanging on his every word. This case isn't really about track limits. It's about who gets to belong in this sport, who gets the benefit of the doubt. I've fought my whole career to show that Formula One belongs to everyone, no matter their background, their color, or where they come from. Lewis looked around the room, making eye contact with each steward. "You're not just deciding about a penalty today. You're deciding what kind of sport Formula One wants to be. One that treats all drivers equally, or one that doesn't." As Lewis sat down, there was a moment of complete silence. Then, surprisingly, Commissioner Dubois removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "This court will recess to consider its verdict," he announced, his voice less confident than before. "We will return in 1 hour with our decision." As the stewards filed out, Lewis noticed Dubois lingering behind. The commissioner looked defeated, a man whose carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. Outside in the hallway, Toto Wolff approached Lewis with a tablet. "You need to see this," he said, showing Lewis a news alert. The headline read, "Breaking, FIA investigating conflict of interest in Hamilton case." The article detailed Dubois's Ferrari connections and questioned his impartiality in decisions. Dating back to 2008, "The world is watching now," Toto said. They can't sweep this under the rug anymore." Lewis nodded, feeling a complex mix of emotions. This had grown beyond a single case into something that might change the sport forever. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally emerging. Not just about one incident, but about the subtle biases that had shaped Formula One for years. While the stewards deliberated, Lewis found a quiet corner of the building to collect his thoughts. Angela brought him tea, sitting silently beside him as they waited. The past few days had been exhausting, physically, mentally, and emotionally. "Whatever happens next," Angela said finally, "you've already won something important here." Lewis looked at her questioningly. "You've forced people to see what's been happening," she explained. "Not just in this case, but throughout your career. Things that were whispered about before are now being discussed openly." Lewis nodded slowly. I never wanted to be the one to fight this battle. I just wanted to race. I know, Angela said. But sometimes the battles find us, not the other way. Around. As they returned to the main waiting area, Lewis's phone rang. It was his father. I'm watching the news coverage, Anthony Hamilton said. How are you holding up? I'm okay, Dad, Lewis replied, just ready for this to be over. Remember what? I told you when you were just starting out? When that karting official tried to disqualify you for that nonsense penalty? Lewis smiled at the memory. You said, they can't stop you if you're fast enough. That's right, his father said. And no one has ever been faster than you, son. Not on the track, and not in standing up for what's right. After ending the call, Lewis rejoined Marcus, who was reviewing notes. Any insights on how the deliberation might be going? Lewis asked. Marcus shook his head. It's unusual for it to take this long. My guess is there's disagreement among the EE stewards. An hour stretched into 2. Journalists and team representatives paced the hallways. Finally, an FIA assistant announced that the panel was ready to deliver their verdict. As people filed back into the hearing room, the tension was palpable. Lewis noticed Steward Rodriguez looking resolute, while 2 other stewards appeared uncomfortable. Commissioner Dubois sat in the center, his expression unreadable. Before delivering our verdict, Dubois began, I wish to acknowledge that this case has raised important questions about our procedures and impartiality. This was unexpected. Lewis exchanged a glance with Marcus. The panel has reviewed all evidence thoroughly, Dubois continued, including Mr. Verstappen's testimony and the telemetry data presented this morning. He paused, removing his glasses. There has been much discussion about my role in this proceeding. Questions about potential conflicts of interest have been raised. The room was completely silent. These are serious matters that deserve proper investigation. Therefore, I have decided to recuse myself from this case, effective immediately. Steward Rodriguez will announce the panel's decision. Murmurs filled the room as Dubois stood and walked out. It was unprecedented. A commissioner recusing himself at the final moment of a hearing. Ana Rodriguez moved to the center seat, looking composed and professional. The panel has reached a decision, she announced. By a vote of 5-0, we find that Lewis Hamilton did not violate Rule 12.2.1 during the Monaco Grand Prix. His actions were justified for safety reasons, and he gained no lasting advantage. The case is dismissed. Relief washed over Lewis. The verdict was just, based on the facts of the incident. But more important was what had happened. Dubois's recusal, the unanimous vote, the acknowledgement that something deeper had been wrong with the proceedings. Steady. People began to react. Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. I have been authorized to make one additional statement. The FIA acknowledges that proper procedures were not followed in this case. Evidence was selectively presented, and a potential conflict of interest was not disclosed. She looked directly at Lewis. The FIA owes Mr. Hamilton an apology. The organization will be conducting a full review of its disciplinary procedures to ensure this situation is not repeated. The room erupted in conversation. Journalists rushed out to report the news. Team members approached Lewis with congratulations and support. As Lewis thanked his legal team, he noticed a figure waiting by the door, Commissioner Dubois. After a moment's hesitation, Lewis walked over to him. Mr. Hamilton, Dubois said quietly, may I speak with you privately? Lewis nodded, and they stepped into an empty meeting room. I owe you an apology, Dubois began, his voice subdued. Not just for this hearing, but for my conduct over the years. Lewis studied the man's face. There seemed to be genuine regret there. My views have evolved, Dubois continued. Your words today made me reflect on my own journey in this sport. It took courage to recuse yourself, Lewis acknowledged. Dubois shook his head. Not courage, necessity. The evidence of my bias had become undeniable, even to myself. He hesitated before continuing. When you first entered Formula One, I was part of the old guard. We had certain ideas about how drivers should behave, what they should care about. You challenged all of that. By being different, Lewis said. Yes, Dubois admitted. Your racing style was different. Your appearance, your interests outside the sport, and your willingness to speak out on issues beyond racing. He sighed heavily. It's not an excuse, but an explanation. I judged you unfairly because you represented change in a sport I wanted to keep the same. Lewis considered his words. Change is inevitable, Commissioner, in racing and in life. Please, call me Bernard, Dubois said, extending his hand. I am no longer a commissioner. I submitted my resignation to the president this morning. As they shook hands, Lewis realized something important had changed. Not just for him, but perhaps for the sport itself. I believe we both want what's best for Formula One, Lewis said, even if we've seen it differently. Dubois nodded. Your impact on this sport will last long after both of us are gone, Mr. Hamilton. And today, I finally understand that's a good thing. When Lewis emerged from the meeting room, a crowd of reporters waited. Questions flew from every direction. Lewis, how do you feel about the verdict? Did Commissioner Dubois apologize to you? Will you push for further investigation into past decisions? Lewis raised his hands for quiet. Today, justice was served, he said simply. That's what matters most. Unsatisfied, a reporter pressed. But what about Dubois' bias? His Ferrari connections that might have affected your 2008 championship? Lewis paused, considering his words carefully. This was a pivotal moment. He could fuel the fire, demand investigations into past wrongs, seek vindication for old wounds, or he could choose a different path. Racing is about looking forward, not backward, Lewis said finally. What matters now is that the sport becomes more fair, more transparent, and more inclusive for everyone. The press conference continued, but Lewis kept his focus on the future, not the past. Later, as he walked out of the FIA building with his team, fans cheered and photographers' flashes lit up the street. Angela leaned close to him. You're being very gracious about Dubois. Lewis nodded. His career is over. His reputation is damaged. What would be gained by pushing for more? Justice for the past, she suggested. Maybe, Lewis acknowledged. But I'd rather focus on justice for the future, making sure the next young driver who's different doesn't face the same barriers. Toto Wolff joined them. The president wants to meet tomorrow. He's talking about forming a commission on bias in officiating, with you as an advisor. Lewis smiled. Tell him I'm interested. As they reached their car, Lewis spotted the young girl from earlier, Amara, still waiting with her father. She waved excitedly when she saw him. Lewis walked over and knelt to her level again. You're still here? She nodded. Dad said you won, that you beat the unfair judge. Lewis glanced at her father, then back to her. It wasn't about winning or beating anyone. It was about making sure the rules are fair for everyone. Will you still race on Sunday? She asked. Yes, Lewis promised. And someday, maybe you will too. As their car pulled away, Lewis looked out at the crowd of supporters. What had begun as a fight against an unfair penalty had become something much more significant. a turning point not just for him, but for the sport he loved. The bias that had shadowed him for years had finally been dragged into the light, and in that light, it couldn't survive. The laughter in the courtroom had been the spark that ignited change, but Lewis's dignity and determination had turned that spark into a flame that would continue to burn long after this case was forgotten. While Lewis dealt with the press and supporters outside, another drama had unfolded behind the closed doors of the steward's deliberation room. Lewis would learn about these events only later, pieced together from accounts shared by Steward Rodriguez and others who had been present. The deliberation had begun tensely, with Commissioner Dubois attempting to steer the conversation toward a compromise verdict, one that would acknowledge Lewis's safety concerns but still impose a lesser penalty. Perhaps a fine rather than a race ban, Dubois had suggested. That would recognize the technical violation while accounting for the mitigating circumstances. Steward Rodriguez had spoken up first. "I see no violation whatsoever. The evidence clearly shows Hamilton had no choice but to leave the track." "I agree," said Steward Paolo Bianchi, an Italian former race engineer. "The telemetry data is conclusive. He lost time overall. And Verstappen's testimony confirms it," added Steward Sarah Thompson, a British safety expert. "The other driver involved admits Hamilton was avoiding a collision." Dubois had frowned, realizing he was losing control of the panel. "Nevertheless, rules must be enforced consistently. If we dismiss this case entirely, what message does that send?" "That safety comes first," Rodriguez had countered. "That's precisely the message we should be sending." The conversation had grown more heated, as Dubois insisted on some form of penalty. Finally, Rodriguez had placed a document on the table. "Before we vote, we need to address the conflict of interest issue," she had said firmly. "I've prepared a formal motion requesting Commissioner Dubois recuse himself from this case." The room had fallen silent. Such a motion was unprecedented. "On what grounds?" Dubois had demanded, his face flushing. "Multiple grounds," Rodriguez had replied calmly. "Your involvement in the 2008 Spa decision, your published articles criticizing Hamilton, and most seriously, your undisclosed Ferrari connections during Hamilton's early career." Rodriguez had then revealed that she had independently verified Marcus's claims about Dubois' son working for Ferrari during the 2007-2008 seasons. "This is outrageous," Dubois had sputtered. "My son's employment has nothing to do with my impartiality." Section 14.3 of our own guidelines states otherwise, Rodriguez had countered, sliding a copy of the regulations across the table. Any connection that could create even the appearance of bias should be disclosed. The other stewards had exchanged uncomfortable glances. None had known about this connection. "If you don't recuse yourself," Rodriguez had continued, "I will submit this information to the Ethics Committee, along with evidence that you met privately with Laurent to discuss strategy against Hamilton." Dubois' face had drained of color. "How did you—" "It doesn't matter how I know," Rodriguez had interrupted. "What matters is that it happened, and it was improper." A tense silence had filled the room. Finally, Steward Thompson had spoken. "I think Anna is right, Commissioner. For the integrity of the process, you should step aside." One by one, the other stewards had nodded in agreement. Dubois had found himself isolated. "Fine," he had said eventually. "I will recuse myself. But the final decision is still yours to make." With Dubois no longer voting, the 5 remaining stewards had reached their unanimous decision quickly. The evidence was clear. Lewis had violated no rules and deserved no penalty. But Rodriguez hadn't been satisfied with just winning the case. "We need to acknowledge the procedural problems," she had insisted, "the selective presentation of evidence, the withholding of Verstappen's statement, the conflict of interest. That will embarrass the FIA," another steward had cautioned. "The FIA has embarrassed itself," Rodriguez had replied. "Acknowledging it is the first step to fixing the problem." Eventually, they had agreed on the statement Rodriguez would deliver, including the formal apology to Lewis. It had been a watershed moment, perhaps the first time the organization had so openly admitted its failures. Meanwhile, outside the deliberation room, Lewis received a message from Max Verstappen. "Whatever happens, we all know the truth." Lewis had smiled at that. Their rivalry on track remained intense, but there was a mutual respect that transcended competition. Max had risked criticism from his own team by speaking up. That took courage. Back at his hotel that evening, Lewis was finally able to relax. The case was over. Justice had prevailed. His phone had been flooded with messages from fellow drivers, celebrities, fans, and family members. One message stood out, from Fernando Alonso, a driver with whom Lewis had shared a complex relationship over the years. "Today, you won something more important than a race. You changed the sport for the better." "Respect," Angela ordered room service, while Lewis called his parents to share the news. "I knew you'd win," his father said, his voice thick with emotion. "They picked the wrong driver to mess with." "It wasn't just about winning, Dad," Lewis replied. "Something important happened today. The sport might actually change because of this." After the call ended, Lewis stared out at the Paris skyline, thinking about the unexpected turns the week had taken. What had begun as a straightforward defense against a penalty had evolved into something much more significant. Marcus arrived with a bottle of champagne. "To justice," he toasted as they clinked glasses. "And to change," Lewis added. Later, as Adithifu, Angela and Marcus discussed the day's events. Lewis stepped onto the balcony for a moment alone. His phone buzzed with a text from Toto. "President confirmed the bias commission. They want to announce it after the next race. You've started something important here." Lewis smiled, feeling a complex mix of vindication, relief, and hope. Throughout his career, he had fought to be judged fairly, on his talent, not his background or appearance or interests outside racing. Today felt like a breakthrough in that long struggle. As he looked out over the city lights, Lewis thought about young Amara with her handmade sign. Perhaps she wouldn't have to fight the same battles he had. Perhaps the path would be a little smoother for the next generation of diverse drivers. That, more than any victory on track, would be his greatest legacy. Lewis returned inside to find Angela showing Marcus video clips of fans celebrating outside the FIA headquarters. "You've become more than a driver to these people," Angela observed. "You're a symbol of something bigger." Lewis nodded thoughtfully. "With great power comes great responsibility," he quoted with a small smile. "Spider-Man," Marcus laughed. "My dad, actually," Lewis replied. "That's what he told me after my first championship. That winning gave me a platform, and I had a responsibility to use it wisely." As the evening wound down, Lewis felt a sense of peace that had eluded him since the case began. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new races, new battles. But tonight, he could rest, knowing that he had stood his ground and helped bend the arc of his sport a little further toward justice. 3 days after the hearing, Lewis was back at the Monaco circuit for a scheduled testing session. The team needed data on some aerodynamic upgrades, but Lewis had another reason for wanting to return to the scene of the incident. He stood at Casino Corner early in the morning before the track opened, studying the exact spot where he'd made that split-second decision to avoid a collision with Max. The track looked different now, peaceful and empty, without the noise and pressure of race day. It was hard to believe this small stretch of asphalt had sparked such a momentous chain of events. "Reflecting on your escape route?" a voice called from behind him. Lewis turned to see Max Verstappen approaching, hands in his pockets. Red Bull, team jacket zipped against the morning chill. "Something like that," Lewis replied. "Thanks again for speaking up at the hearing." Max shrugged. "It was the truth. You had nowhere to go." They stood side by side, looking at the corner that had brought them together off track in an unexpected way. "I heard Dubois resigned completely," Max said after a moment. Lewis nodded. "Yesterday, the FIA announced they're forming a commission to review all disciplinary procedures." "Good," Max replied simply. "The stewards have too much power without enough accountability." A comfortable silence fell between them. Though fierce rivals on track, both men understood the importance of fairness in their sport. "The pressure didn't end after Dubois resigned," Lewis said suddenly, feeling the need to share something few people knew. "The day after the hearing, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Michel Dubois, the commissioner's son." Max looked surprised. "What did he want?" "To apologize," Lewis answered, "but also to explain. He told me his father wasn't always like this, that in recent years he'd grown bitter about the changing face of Formula One." "Changing how?" Max asked, though they both knew the answer. "More diverse, more outspoken on social issues. Less traditional," Lewis explained. "Michel said his father represented an old guard that was losing influence, and it made him resistant to change." "That doesn't excuse bias," Max said firmly. "No, it doesn't," Lewis agreed. "But understanding it might help prevent it in the future." "Won't eat." They walked back toward the paddock. Lewis felt a strange sense of closure. The corner would always be there, unchanged by the drama that had unfolded because of what happened there. Racing continued, as it always did. Later that morning, Lewis sat in the Mercedes garage, waiting while engineers made adjustments to his car. His phone buzzed with a message from Toto. "Press conference in 10 Minuten. FIA President making announcement." Lewis watched the live stream on a team tablet. Jean Toussaint stood at a podium in Paris, looking solemn but determined. "The events of the past week have revealed serious flaws in our disciplinary procedures," Toussaint began. "After careful consideration, the FIA has decided to take several immediate actions." He outlined a comprehensive plan, an independent review of all major penalties from the past 5 years, new guidelines requiring stewards to disclose any potential conflicts of interest, and most significantly, the formation of a Fairness and Inclusion Commission to ensure bias didn't influence future decisions. "Finally," Toussaint said, "I am pleased to announce that Lewis Hamilton has agreed to serve as a special advisor to this commission, bringing his unique perspective and experience to help us build a more equitable governance structure." Lewis smiled. He'd agreed to the role yesterday, but hadn't expected such a quick announcement. Already, the case that began with Dubois's dismissive laugh was creating real change. His phone began lighting up with congratulatory messages. One caught his attention, from Ana Rodriguez. "You made this happen, not just with your driving, but with your dignity. Thank you." The test session went well, with Lewis posting the fastest time of the day. As he climbed out of his car, he found Angela waiting with news. "You won't believe this," she said, showing him her phone. "Someone leaked emails between Dubois and the FIA from 2008. They show that after your penalty at Spa, Dubois argued against you even though other stewards were unsure." Lewis scrolled through the article, reading excerpts from the emails. In one, Dubois had written, "Hamilton's driving style sets a dangerous precedent. We must take a firm stance." In another, "My contacts at Ferrari confirm this decision is in the best interests of the sport." The Ferrari connection was even deeper than we thought, Angela said. The article suggests Dubois was intentionally trying to help Ferrari win the championship over you. Lewis handed back the phone, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The 2008 season had been decided by just 1 point. The Spa penalty had nearly cost him his first title. "What will you do with this information?" Angela asked. Lewis watched his team working on his car, thinking about his journey and the battles he'd fought both on and off the track. "Nothing," he finally said. Dubois apologized and seems genuinely changed. Reopening old wounds won't help the sport move forward. Angela looked surprised. "You're letting it go? After all you went through?" Lewis smiled. "I'm not letting it go. I'm choosing a different path. The truth is out now, and that's what matters. The next young driver who looks like me won't have to face the same doubts and biases." He took out his phone and showed Angela a message he was drafting to post on social media. "In racing, as in life, we can't change the past, but we can learn from it and make a better future. I'm proud of how far our sport has come and excited about where we're going together." "That's why you're a champion, Lewis," Angela said softly, "on and off the track." In the days that followed, Lewis's role on the new commission was announced formally. The racing world largely applauded the move, seeing it as a step toward greater accountability and fairness. Commissioner Dubois made no public statements, but Lewis received a handwritten letter from him. "What I once saw as a threat to tradition, I now recognize as the necessary evolution of our sport," Dubois wrote. "Your grace in victory has taught me more than your driving ever could." 2 weeks later, Lewis returned to racing at the Canadian Grand Prix. During the driver's parade, every driver wore a small badge reading, "Racing is for everyone," an initiative Max had surprisingly helped organize. As Lewis prepared for the race, strapping into his car and going through his pre-race ritual, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battles off track had been as important as those on it. The laughter that had once dismissively echoed in that hearing room had transformed into something powerful, a catalyst for change that would resonate through Formula One for years to come. When the lights went out and the race began, Lewis surged forward with a perfect start. But this time, he was racing for something bigger than just himself. He was racing to show that justice, fairness, and inclusion made the sport stronger, not weaker, and in that mission, he had already claimed his greatest victory. 2 days after Lewis's victory at the Canadian Grand Prix, he was back in his Monaco apartment, enjoying a rare day off. The race had been one of his best, a perfect drive from pole to checkered flag. The victory had felt especially sweet after the events of the previous weeks. Lewis was sipping his morning green tea on the balcony. When his phone rang, it was Toto Wolff. "Lewis, you're not going to believe this," Toto said, his voice unusually animated. "Someone leaked emails between Dubois and the FIA from 2008. They show that after your penalty at Spa, Dubois argued against you even though other stewards were unsure. But here's the shocking part. His son was working for Ferrari at the time." Lewis sat up straight. "Ferrari? Massa was fighting me for the championship?" "Exactly," Toto confirmed. "It was a clear conflict of interest that was never disclosed. The FIA is launching a full investigation into past decisions." After the call ended, Lewis stared out at the Mediterranean, processing this revelation. The 2008 season had been his second in Formula One, a fierce battle with Ferrari's Felipe Massa that came down to the final corner of the final race. The controversial penalty at Spa had nearly cost Lewis the championship, and now it seemed that penalty might have been influenced by hidden biases and undisclosed conflicts. His phone buzzed again with messages as the news spread. Journalists were requesting comments. Former drivers were expressing outrage. Even Felipe Massa had released a statement saying he was disturbed by the allegations and wanted answers. Later that day, Lewis met with Angela by the harbor. They walked along the water's edge, away from the crowds and cameras that had gathered near his building. "So it wasn't just about you being different," Angela said. "Dubois had personal reasons to want Ferrari to win." Lewis nodded slowly. "All these years, I thought it was only about race or background. But sometimes bias has many layers." They stopped to watch boats bobbing in the clear blue water. Monaco looked peaceful today, a stark contrast to the storm of controversy brewing. In the racing world, "What will you do with this information?" Angela asked. "You could demand the FIA formally review the 2008 results. Some people are already calling for that." Lewis watched a yacht sailing toward the horizon, thinking about his journey and how far he'd come since that contentious season. "Nothing," he finally said. "Dubois apologized and seems genuinely changed. Reopening old wounds won't help the sport move forward." Angela looked surprised. "You're letting it go? After all you went through?" Lewis smiled. "I'm not letting it go. I'm choosing a different path. The truth is out now, and that's what matters. The next young driver who looks like me won't have to face the same doubts and biases." He took out his phone and showed Angela a message he was drafting to post on social media. "In racing, as in life, we can't change the past, but we can learn from it and make a better future. I'm proud of how far our sport has come and excited about where we're going together." "That's why you're a champion, Lewis," Angela said softly. On and off the track. As the sun began to set over Monaco, Lewis received another unexpected call, this time from an unknown number. It was Michel Dubois, the former commissioner's son. "Mr. Hamilton," he said, his voice hesitant. "I wanted to speak with you directly before the media circus gets worse." "I'm listening," Lewis replied, keeping his tone neutral. "What the emails show is true," Michel admitted. "I was working for Ferrari in 2008, and my father didn't disclose that when ruling on your case at Spa. I've carried that guilt for years." There was a pause before he continued. "My father wasn't always the man you met in that hearing room. He loved racing, its purity and competition. But over time, he became resistant to change, to new voices, new perspectives, new ways of approaching the sport." Lewis thought about his own journey in Formula One, how he'd challenged conventions not just with his driving, but with his appearance, his interests outside racing, his willingness to speak on social issues. "Why are you telling me this now?" Lewis asked. "Because you deserve to know the whole truth," Michel replied. "And because my father is finally confronting his own biases. Your dignity in that hearing room changed something in him." After the call ended, Lewis sat in the growing darkness of his apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. The bias that had shadowed him for years had been more complex than he'd realized. A mix of resistance to change, personal connections, and deep-rooted prejudices about who belonged in the sport. The next morning, Lewis met with Marcus Chen for breakfast at a quiet cafe away from the media attention. "The FIA Ethics Committee wants to interview you about the 2008 emails," Marcus said. "They're considering retroactive action." Lewis shook his head. "Tell them I'm declining. I've said all I need to say in my social media statement." Marcus looked surprised. "This could validate everything you've experienced. Don't you want that recognition?" "I already have it," Lewis replied. "The truth is out. That's enough." As they finished breakfast, a young boy approached their table with his father. The child, no more than 8 years old, clutched a toy Mercedes car. "Mr. Hamilton," the boy said shyly, "I want to be a racer like you when I grow up." Lewis smiled and signed the toy car. "What's your name?" "Matteo," the boy answered. "Well, Matteo, remember this. Race with your heart. Stand up for what's right, and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong." As Lewis watched the boy leave, clutching his signed car with a huge smile, he felt a sense of peace. The hidden truth about Dubois and the 2008 season had finally come to light. Not just about one race or one decision, but about the subtle ways bias had shaped his journey. The laughter in the courtroom had been the breaking point that finally brought everything into the open. Now, as he looked toward the future, Lewis knew that his greatest victory wasn't winning championships. It was changing the sport itself, making it more fair, more open, and more just for the next generation of dreamers who, like him, just wanted a fair chance to prove themselves on the world's fastest tracks. The cliffhanger that had kept fans guessing throughout the story. Why Commissioner Dubois seemed to have such a personal vendetta against Lewis was finally revealed to be more complex than anyone imagined. It wasn't just about race or background, but about hidden conflicts of interest that had shaped Formula One's history for years. Lewis's victory in the courtroom did more than clear his name. It began a new chapter for the sport he loves, one where the only thing that matters is talent, determination, and the courage to race fairly, both on the track and off it. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through Lewis's fight for justice, both on and off the track. Where are you listening from? We'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring and thought-provoking content like this one. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and family to spread kindness and awareness about the importance of standing up for what's right, even when facing powerful opposition. Until next time, remember that true champions aren't just defined by their victories, but by the positive change they create in the world around them.